Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, June 30th, 2022, and we are here at the Transportation Commission meeting, and we are all joined virtually. My name is Bridget Obikoya, and I am the Transportation Commission staff liaison. This meeting is being recorded, so please turn your mics off when you are not speaking. Before the start of the agenda items, are there any citizen comments on matters not on the agenda? Hearing none, I will turn the meeting over to Chairman Slatt along with the first agenda item, which is the Heights Phase 2 for the fields and parking. And we have staff member Robert Gibson along with the development team. So I'll turn it over to you, Chairman Slatt.
Great, thank you. I have no particular business here at the beginning, so staff or the APS staff or DES staff are welcome to take it away.
Bridget suggested I introduce the project, so this is Robert Gibson from Arlington DES Development Services, and I'm going to attempt to share my screen correctly here, which is always a challenge. So let me know if you can see my presentation.
Yes.
Perfect. So we are back for round 2 of phase 2 on the Heights building. We spoke about this in, I think it was late April. And the Transportation Commission was the first commission to hear this case as it went before and got ready for county board hearing. And we got a lot of comments from the commissions and ultimately made a recommendation to the board for deferral of the case. And in the meantime, the project has been worked on by APS and staff to address the issues that were raised by in the deferral report. And I will just provide a quick recap of the site location here in West Roslyn. This is specifically the northern portion of the Heights building project, which is generally bound by Wilson Boulevard, North Quinn Street, and 18th Street North, with the Penzance project and the Roslyn Highlands Park directly to the east. And specifically, we are looking at amending the approved use permit for the school to add 61 spaces of partially below grade parking that will support a number of users, including staff, visitors, ADA compliant parking for students and visitors, students, families, and visitors, van parking, maintenance vehicle parking, generally a broad spectrum of parking to support the principal use of the school. In addition to the field, the top of the field provides a synthetic turf. In addition to the parking, the structure provides a synthetic turf field above the parking that is directly accessible from the main level of the school. And it will provide a covered entrance to the Shriver program, specifically from Quinn and 18th Street, and covered secure bicycle parking along that walkway there. Many of the details of the project are the same as what was presented previously, though there are 4 areas specifically that the county board action that was approved deferred the project to look at specifically. The first was the 18th Street North width and parking lane issue, the 18th Street North streetscape, which was in part wrapped up in that parking lane discussion. Additionally, the 18th Street North operations associated with the temporary closure of 18th Street when APS uses the street exclusively for their morning arrival and departure. And then specifically take a second look at the field elevation. There was some discussion about about having the field at a 175 elevation, which was consistent with what initially came forward years prior. However, that was put on hold and APS reevaluated it. And in this project, we'll see their thoughts, and hopefully that will provide some good insight to the commissions and public as we work this forward. Specifically for the 4 issues, the changes that have been implemented include the provision of the parking lane on 18th Street. This parking lane maintains the street width that is out there today. It is consistent with the RAPS plan generally for the street cross section as proposed for this segment along the school frontage. And this was a change from what was originally proposed with a extension of the curb out to the travel lane, removing the parking lane. And so the application has been updated with that parking lane. In addition, there was a lot of discussion about how to address the streetscape along 18th Street North. The original proposal had sort of 3 zones, a landing zone for people coming off of the buses, then a planting zone, and then a clear sidewalk. That was achieved principally by removing the parking lane. Keeping the parking lane, APS has worked with staff to identify a streetscape section that is consistent with the RAPS plan, providing a minimum of 10 feet of clear at the back of sidewalk to help boarding and alighting of school buses, and provide ample width for pedestrian flow along 18th Street North. Behind that, a 5-foot wide planter is provided to provide separation and buffer from the both the parking garage structure that is partially above grade and the field above. The 5-foot wide planting structure will allow columnar trees to be planted along that length and will provide a low wall that could be used potentially as a seating wall, and also helps to support additional planting soil volume to ensure the health of the trees. The third issue that was identified was the 18th Street North operations. We have a new condition in the staff report, condition 67, which details how APS will submit a operations plan for 18th Street, have that reviewed by DES and approved. DES and APS will cooperate on implementation and modification of that over time as it's needed. And hopefully this will ensure that the staffing, any traffic control devices and any other operational procedures that are needed to safely close the street while providing access to the APS garage for APS users can occur, ensuring and continuing APS's commitment to safety for its students. And so the county supports condition 67 as written, and we believe APS is satisfied with the language also. The fourth and final issue is relative to the field elevation. APS has discussed this with the county in depth, and as they've looked at their programmatic needs, they continue to want to present a field elevation at 180, allowing direct access from the main level of the school. And APS will discuss how this approach will equitably support the broadest base of school users. And with that in mind, this is largely the same field elevation and design as proposed previously. However, APS has had a chance to work on some additional architectural detailing throughout the design of the the garage facade and the material choices for the walkway that leads along North Quinn Street. With that and with all this in mind, the county manager recommends that the project be approved with the use permit amendment for a below-grade parking structure with a lighted synthetic turf above, with modifications for reduced parking requirements for parking reduction, and allow parking space to be located off-site, subject to the conditions of the staff report and previously approved conditions. With that, I'd like to turn this over to APS to present their changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. This is Jeff Chambers, Director of Design and Construction with APS. I'm going to attempt to share my screen at this point. Is everyone able to see the screen?
Looks great.
Okay, great. A lot of the information that we have is some of what Rob showed, but there are actually some additional details. And in the presentation that's provided following this presentation is the presentation from a couple of months ago for reference by the commission members. I did want to make sure that one of the things that we really are focused on is inclusion of all of our students, and Rob touched on that a little bit. And that's one of the things that really is addressing the field elevation and how that works with our program, and also makes it inviting, provide provisions to make it inviting for the community use in non-school hours. So moving. All right. Just in summary, the phase 2 project was reviewed by the Planning Commission and your commission and other commissions April and May of 2022, and was deferred at the May meeting as previously discussed. And in the time since, we've completed design revisions to address the comments from county staff and commission members, particularly around the streetscape and facade treatment. I think we're very comfortable with what is being proposed as these changes. We did keep, as I noted, the elevation of the field the same because it's essential, providing acceptable and universal access from the building. The materials, as I noted, from the May 2nd Planning Commission meeting are included at the end of this presentation for reference. Now we'll get into some of the revisions. Rob noted some of these, or noted all of these, but basically we revised the 18th Street North streetscape. We maintained the existing street width and parking lane adjacent to the APS frontage. Added continuous elevated planting strip with trees and other plantings. Reduced the sidewalk to a clear width of 10 feet, as was noted in the RAPS program. We did make a geometry change to the stair from the 18th Street North to the field to make it more inviting and less closed off. It was just a straight stair. It now flares out, and we do have a rendering of that to show. Additional details on the finishes at the covered entrance to the building level G1 and the facade treatments along 18th Street North, and we added a planting strip at North Quinn Street adjacent to the railing to soften that railing and entrance area. A rendering that Rob had shown in his presentation. You can see the revised design with the narrower sidewalk and the planting strip and the columnar trees and planting bed that can be much softer than the hard edge of the concrete. It also achieves the goals of bringing the trees away from where the buses would be pulling in, and the trees are notorious for taking off bus mirrors. So this will definitely be helpful from that standpoint, and I believe achieve the goals of softening that facade. In the bottom, you can see the initial design where we had the wider sidewalk. And as Rob had noted and shown, you can see the initial design where we essentially had the tree planting strip between two sidewalks, and on the revised design, we're maintaining the existing roadway width and parking frontage along APS frontage, and providing the trees, which are essentially intended to grow more vertical rather than spreading, and also addressing some of the comments with regard to how we would address that facade to provide other elements that may soften the facade in winter when the leaves on the trees are not present. So this is the renderings from the initial design. You can see that the entrance to the ground level is still a sloped sidewalk that goes into the building, and one of the administrative areas happens to be the Schreiber administrative area, and keeping it open, also covered bike parking for student use. The staff bicycle facility is within the garage itself, and you can see the width of the drive lane with the parking being utilized by buses for pickup and drop off. And you can see along Quinn Street where we added the planting strip adjacent to the railing and made some modifications to the illustration that we had of the tree pits along Quinn Street, which were not quite accurate in the initial rendering. So we've modified that, and you can see the facade treatment that we're using on the structure. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in the presentation. One of the comments that was made is how are we going to blend this facility with the existing structure? One of the things that we wanted to do is keep the concrete facade, especially adjacent to Roslyn Highland Park, with the texture and finish of the concrete intended to be similar to what's in Roslyn Highland Park. But we are planning on using a mineral, white mineral coating applied to the concrete wall and soffit. If anybody has been up to the refurbished Ed Center, you can see the type of finish that we are looking at utilizing, which is, I said, made the old Ed Center look quite attractive, I think, with the new finish and white and bright, and that is the intent. And we would have up-down lights in that corridor that would also reflect lighting into the sloped sidewalk area to make it inviting and safe. The proposal at this point is to utilize vertical banners installed between the street trees, possibly designed with the assistance from APS students. It could be a changeable banner type that could be modified over the years and modified with different groups of students within the facility. You can see some precedent images on the left. These aren't specific what we're being intended, but with the arts focus of the Heights program, we felt that we might have some creative uses to do some kind of a vertical banner that would make the facade softer and more useful to the public. And you can see in the plantings that would be provided at the planter level, as well as the vertical trees that would be included. And then again, this is the rendering looking at the project from above Quinn Street, looking up 18th Street North with the field facility on top, which is lighted. From street level, this is the vision that we currently see with the changes that were made. You can see the bright white finish at the entrance, and you can see the banners and the trees and the planting strip along the railing on Quinn Street as well as the planting areas with the trees right along the parking area. And the barrier that you see and the person that's there aren't exactly what's going to be there, but it's just to give you a reference that we will be working with the county to come up with a reasonable control for that street when it is closed for the pickup and drop off operations. This is looking at it from the air in 18th Street, I guess looking from one of the atrium balconies with the Rosslyn Highland Park, as well as the field and the access and the benches in the park that are currently there, and how this would tie into the park and the level entrance from the school directly onto the field. And then this is the stairs that are coming up from 18th Street. These used to be a more narrow stairway, and it was also more closed off. There was more wall on the bench side of that stair. So we made it open again to make it safer and to make it more inviting. And this would be at non-bus times on the street. However, I'm assuming there would probably be parked cars in the parking lane. And this is looking at towards the field from Rosslyn Highland Park, from the basketball court. And you can see the structure of the building to the left and the outline of the APA building on the right, with the access to the field being by stair and ramp, 2 ramps actually. And then this is looking from, again, above Quinn Street, looking east towards the top of the field. You can see the banners are also going to be visible from the field. The other change that we made was the screening that we have on the space between the existing building and the new structure is utilizing a screen that is actually incorporated into the existing Heights building to provide a transition between the two structures. And that's what we have for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioners, if you have questions or feedback, raise your hands. I guess I'll kick off and say that, I don't know if I zoned out for a minute and missed it, but was there a part of this presentation that went into detail about why APS feels that they can't change the field height elevation?
We've had a lot of discussion on that since the deferral, and because of inclusion of our students and ramping, we would actually have to reduce the size of the field. We would also be providing ramps rather than having a inclusive environment for the students. And we just feel that that is not what we provide for our students, which is the prime reason for the field and the use of the field, especially with the Schreiber program within the building. The Schreiber building is on the level of the field as well as the level below, and as well as the rest of the HB program.
Understood. Can you talk about what changed that the elevation was thought to be able to be 175, you know, when we had this long discussion years ago, but now can't be?
I think one of the things that has happened is the inclusive environment that we're working under at this point, and we've learned a lot of lessons with multi-story buildings that we did not have at the time of putting this together. And I don't believe that we had developed, you know, through the schematic design. We never got into the true details of the field because it was being thought that it may not be able to be built at this time because of the fire station being on the site. And I don't think the attention was spent that could have been spent or should have been spent to further evaluate those issues. But one of the things that's been pushed at APS in the past 5 years is universal design, so that if one student can do it, all students can do it. And that's really what we try to do in all of our buildings now.
Okay, I'm not sure I followed that entirely. Are you saying that you think APS was thinking that the field would not have been accessible under the previous design at 175?
At 175, it was designed with the students going out into Roslyn Highland Park, those that were unable to navigate stairs because the main access to it was steps.
Gotcha.
At 175. Okay. So we were using the park to get into it. Also with the recent issues with security and safety of our students during the school day, we were not thinking about it being as open. At that point in time, HB was truly an open program. All of our schools are now secure, showing ID to get in. At the time of this, it was not done that way. So we thought it would be more of a blending of students and community getting to the field even during the school day. But it's really not panning out that way. And some of our other fields that we have where community comes in the middle of a phys ed class, et cetera, et cetera. So, we didn't really want that blending because APS is responsible for the students, from the time they come to the building till the time that they leave. So we need to maintain the security and safety of those students. But that said, during the weekends and evenings, it would be fully accessible to the community.
Got you. Commissioner Nolan, why don't you go ahead?
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, question regarding the end of the presentation there. Sorry, I think you were mentioning this, but I just didn't quite understand. The screen connecting, what is being connected there and how is that being facilitated?
I'm not sure which screen oh, I know what you're talking about, the rendering at the end. Because of the elevation changes that we were working, let me try to share that again. I think this is what you're asking the question on.
Yeah, it was at the end there, and I apologize to confuse you further, but you mentioned that, it didn't quite click, and I remember hearing something about a screen in terms of connection. So yeah, if you can pop that up and then.
Yeah, right here. We had an open fence, just the standard fence that we've been using elsewhere. This is actually a perforated stainless panel that matches the panels that are used on the building, so that it helps to blend the two structures using the same language.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is the only rendering that really shows that. So from the street, it would look a little different than it does from flying above it.
Certainly. No, I can start to see it now, and I agree. That makes sense. Okay.
Commissioner Lantelme, you're up next.
Thank you, Chair Slatt. A couple of questions. First off, looking at this picture here, is there, since you have the fence we were just talking about from Commissioner Nolan, why aren't the stairs wide across there rather than having a fence there, have wider steps going up? Is there some structural reason why we couldn't do that? The wider stairs tend to make things more inviting. So that'd be one question. I would also have a question for Mr. Gibson. We're moving the street lights to the tree pit right up against the building, which seems like a good idea. I'm assuming DES is okay with that and that they would continue to be maintained and operated, owned by DES, or would they become APS responsibility? So those are two questions I have for coming back for some comments.
I'll start with the entrance, the stairs. The stairs are pulled away because the right adjacent to where that screen is the entrance to the Schreiber building. And we have the windows and the existing structure that we're working with there. And the stairs would interfere with that framing and that window system, and also make it very low at the entrance itself.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Gibson, for the streetlights?
Yes, yes, they would be county owned and maintained lighting. I anticipate that they would be Cobra style to provide a longer throw of the light as opposed to the more traditional Carlisle style. But we'll continue to work with APS to do a full photometric study, and there could be a change from Cobra to Carlisle or vice versa, depending on the lighting study.
Thank you. My comments on this are, as wearing my Transportation Commission hat, this is an improvement. I do still have some questions about how the conflict for the Shriver students having to walk around to the entrance, across the drive down to the pickup drop off, again, mostly for Shriver. How are you going to be able to manage that conflict? Because that, of course, has not been eliminated. And all the Shriver students will have to go across that driveway entrance. How is that going to be operated? Right.
The essentially during the pickup and drop off time, there would be very limited traffic that would be permitted. Essentially, if you notice, we're blocking traffic. The only people that would be going in there at the time of pickup and drop off would be parents of Shriver students that need the accessibility to drop off. The accessible spaces that we put on Quinn Street were put there because it's all we had or have at the building currently. They were added to the project during the time that the fire station was there. We don't think that we would want to remove those spaces because they can still be used by the community and as overflow handicapped parking, but they are not signed specifically for school use. They're just signed for handicapped use, and they are the new accessible version of parking spaces where a vehicle with a disabled driver can pull against the curb and have clear space to get in and out without being in the bike lane. And if you have somebody getting out of the passenger side, they can pull up right against the bike lane like a typical parking space, and then you have 5 feet of access to get in and out of the vehicle from on the sheltered side.
Yeah, good. That is an improvement. That is something we've been asking about at the earlier meeting. So that clearly is an improvement. Again, wearing Transportation Commission hat, I think, again, this is an improvement. I'm reserving comments on design for the Planning Commission, where I will also be attending. So I'll give up my time at this point. Thank you, Chair Slatt.
All right. Any other commission comments or questions? I'm not seeing any hands. Commissioner Muradovic.
Hi, I have a question about the 61 parking spaces in the garage. How did you arrive at that number? And is there any program to potentially reevaluate that down the road, given how much that area is densifying? Maybe down the road there might not be a need for those for that many spaces, and they could be converted into more like Class 1 biking spaces, the type that staff has. Is there any flexibility in the design for that potentially? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that one of the earlier slides has the breakdown of the spaces that we're providing. It's for our maintenance vehicles. There's no place there for them to park at this point in time, and it's been very difficult getting them there. And it's the handicapped accessibility. It's also visitors, et cetera, that can utilize some of those spaces. And then the additional staff. We have, thanks to the county, the 100 spaces in the Penzance project, but that's not enough for the entire staff. We are currently leasing 30 spaces offsite, about a block and a half away. And it's working, but it's a challenge because it has to be managed. It's something that has to be managed. As far as future use, one of the things that's always been part of this project is the garage is being designed as a flat floor. And we do have accessibility from the building itself. They could be converted into educational spaces, such as a science lab or something to that effect that wouldn't necessarily need natural light, because I don't think we want to put any light tubes up through the field. I don't think that would be appropriate. Might be a tripping hazard. But we do keep that in mind because there is no expansion really for this building in the future, but that is a possibility to utilize that. And we wanted to make sure that we had the flat floor, which is part of the design, and it works very well with the 180 elevation as well.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, in addition, this is Robert Gibson once again. I think that the county would support conversion of space to bike parking if the pretty substantial number of racks that are being provided along the Shriver entrance don't meet the needs of students or staff. To be 100%, I think, clear, I think APS has looked at this as maximizing the number of spaces in that volume below the field, and that's how they got to the 61 space count.
Okay.
Their demand numbers may be lower than that, but given the overall project economics and things like that, the 61 spaces is what they have brought forward as the best approach to the project.
And one more question for the bikes. Will there be, or I didn't see in the presentation notes anything about potential e-charging for like the electric bikes or anything? Are there any plans to provide any facilities for that?
We are going to look into that. There are some issues. For instance, at Discover, we do have a charging station, but the third party that runs it, because we can't charge at this point in time, for that, they have disconnected it. You cannot charge there. It's an issue, a legal issue that we're going to have to work through. I know that the county's working through that on properties. I think that Long Branch has added some e-charging stations, so we're going to look at that as part of this. And that would also reduce the parking count as well, because to do a universally accessible space, it's about 13 feet wide, if I recall correctly. So that would reduce the number of spaces as well, depending on how many e-charging stations that we would put in there. But we have talked about it, and it is something that is being considered.
All right.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chambers, I think the question was about electric bike charging.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that this is an area that Arlington County Transportation certainly is looking into. I know that our TDM programs and bike program is constantly evolving our standards. And as this becomes more prevalent and more universal as far as what best practices are, I'm sure that the county will be presenting more information on that to the commission.
All right, thank you.
And I think the other thing that would happen in that structure is after hours, weekend and evening programs. It is parking. It's going to be operated the same. Again, we can't charge for parking. So it would be public parking that it could be for these programs, whether it's a school event or whether it's a parks event. There would be that parking available. And it could be even a community event on a flat floor, whether a flea market or something else could happen in there in the future. We haven't figured out those plans, but it's available to use for that use.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brose, did you still have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to sort of echo, I think, Chairman Slatt's maybe frustration at the field. I know we've gotten an explanation from you all about why you're not making sort of some of the changes we were looking for, but I think we were looking for something else. So anyway, just echoing Chairman Slutt's sort of question around that. It's not a question. I think it's asked and answered, just sort of seconding.
Great. I have a couple, I think, just really short, quick questions. What's the height of that fencing that's around the field?
It's currently designed at the same height as Lover Run. I don't recall the top at this point. I know we talked about multiple elevations. I think it's
10 feet.
It's 10. Thank you, Robin. I appreciate that. That's our project manager. Thank you.
And then, so no changes are being proposed for the parking from what was presented last time around, correct?
That's correct.
Great. And can someone describe just what the public process has been for these changes? What opportunities the public had to learn about the different field elevation and stuff from what was originally proposed, and what opportunities still exist for the public?
We're in the first one right now.
So this did not specifically go back to PFRC or BLPC as an information or comment item given the board's direction. So the sort of core elements of the public process are the Transportation Commission, Planning Commission, and upcoming board hearing.
All right, great. Thank you. Imagine my body language is probably somewhat clear. I'm not thrilled at where we've landed. I understand, I think, why we've landed here. I would love if anybody at APS could provide some additional, what's the word I'm looking for? Assurance that we're going to do more design before approvals in the future or something, so we don't get into a similar situation. I just really hate that we had a very inclusive, very broad process that got a lot of people bought in, and now we're having a very not inclusive, very abbreviated process that is changing decisions that were made and designs that were approved in that more inclusive process. I have a strong feeling that some neighbors across the street are going to wake up when this thing gets built and be like, that isn't what I thought was going over there at all. When the field is 5 feet higher, and instead of walking down the sidewalk looking at kids playing ultimate frisbee, they're looking into a parking garage, and at best maybe it's somebody's feet. So I am not inclined to hold up the process, but the whole thing leaves a bad taste in my mouth and does not lead me to trust APS in any future design process. So I don't know if that requires or merits any response from anybody, but those are my comments at this point. Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yeah, you summed up pretty well how I'm approaching this also. As I said, I'm going to reserve my comments on design for Planning Commission next week, but it just strikes me that this whole area was not really thought through properly when the school was initially designed. We had some very talented and very expensive architects, and I'm disappointed that no one foresaw this. The renderings that you showed us in the original design, we went through this discussion for the field, were, as APS says now, were aspirational, but were never practical. They're just not really buildable. And that's really something that should have been known and vetted and highlighted earlier on in this process when the original building was being done. I think we used the term bait and switch last time, and I hate to even use terms like that, but as Chair Slatt said, this really does leave a bad taste in our mouths. Like I said, I will reserve further comments on this for Planning Commission. For transportation purposes, I think the improvements are sufficient that I'll vote in favor, just because we need to get this done. And we do need to have the appropriate pickup and drop off for the Shriver students. I do believe that is important, but this really is not what we had envisioned for in wraps for this end of 18th Street. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi. Would anyone on the commission care to take a stab at the motion?
Would it help to have the recommendation on the screen, or I leave you guys to freeform your recommendation?
It wouldn't hurt to throw it up there.
Buttons clicking. Thank you.
All right, I'll go ahead and move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board approve the use permit amendment for a below-grade parking structure with a lighted synthetic turf field above, with modifications to the zoning ordinance requirements for a parking reduction and to allow parking spaces to be located off-site, subject to the conditions of our draft staff report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, then let me pull up my spreadsheet and we'll move to a vote. All right, Commissioner Brose.
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Locker. Don't see Locker. Commissioner Ludlow. Commissioner Ludlow? Oh, sorry, you were very quiet. Commissioner Muradovic?
Aye.
Commissioner Price? Don't see Commissioner Price. Commissioner Raddick?
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri? Don't see Commissioner Yeri. Commissioner Shannon? I don't see Commissioner Shannon either. Commissioner Terry?
Aye.
And I will go ahead and vote aye as well. That passes unanimously. And I think we are ready for the next item.
Thank you very much. The next item is the Vdot Smart Scale Round 5 application for FY 2026. And we have staff member Dan Mulliff to present that item.
Good evening. It is a pleasure to be here again. I will be your guide, in fact, for the next 2 agenda items, and they will have a lot of overlap. So I am here today asking for official TC recommendation to the county board to endorse submittal of these applications for Smart Scale, and also the next item on the agenda, Smart Safe Streets for All, excuse me. First, let me apologize for not sending out the board reports in the package. They are on the TC the TC website right now. Certainly, there's no intent to keep them from you or anything like that. We just have to apologize for being behind on answering all the questions that needed to be put into them before we could move them along the process. I will offer to walk you through them, since I know that I'm sure none of you have had a chance to look at them yet. I will offer to walk you through them on a screenshot if you'd like. But in the interests of not making your meeting take longer than necessary, I'll refrain from doing that unless you'd sort of like to ask me to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on, and we will begin talking about Smart Scale. So this is, of course, Virginia's main transportation funding capital program. I'm sure it's very familiar to you. by now. I previously briefed you on DES's thinking regarding this round of Smart Scale at your March 3rd meeting this spring. Just to quickly remind you, this is the state's main grant program for transportation capital. It comes around every 2 years with funding over the next 6 years. We can apply for almost anything, but we have to make a case for it using the state's defined criteria, which favors the number of trips that are affected and the cost of the project. Several other things also, but mainly those are the two sort of that take up the bulk of the scoring. So if you do well in one or the other criteria, you've got a good chance of getting funding, either if your project affects a lot of trips or if it doesn't, but it doesn't cost very much. You've got a pretty good chance. If your project is both expensive and it does not affect very many trips, you can apply. Good luck. So a couple other real quick notes. Some Smart Scale funding is federal. So Smart Scale is the state's funding to jurisdictions and other programs system, but the money that feeds into Smart Scale comes from lots of other places, some of which are federal. Therefore, Smart Scale projects must be on the federalization track, or at least able to be federalized, which means they cost more and take longer. And also, just within the last year or so, you have heard me say this before, Vdot has gotten much stricter in the level of detail that they insist on for grant applications that go to the state. So that includes Smart Scale, of course, also includes other programs that we talk about, TAP, HSIP, things like that. So what that means in practice is that our cost estimates have to be more firm before we can submit a project. That affects lots of other things, like, for example, our right-of-way impacts have to be pretty well understood before we can submit a project, because, of course, if you end up having to buy a property to do a project, that dramatically increases its cost. So in the past, whereas we might have gotten away with applying for projects that were only in their conceptual stages, figuring that we would, take planning to a more detailed level between now and the 6 years from now that money for Smart Scale is likely to be, reaching us. Now, and this is the first round of Smart Scale that this affects us, Vdot won't let us do that anymore. We have to have much more firm project estimates before we can apply. So sadly, that narrows the list of projects that we can viably apply for by quite a lot, at least until our planning catches up to, the new timeline, right? We can adjust to this internally, but it's going to take a while to catch up. So all of that's background. Let's move on to what I know you are more interested in, the projects that we're hoping to apply for. As always, projects are selected via a combination of project need, likely competitiveness in the program, and readiness to both compete in the program and be built. Special asterisk on that readiness point for this round, remembering what I just said a minute ago. Unfortunately, the list of viable projects is small. So we are proposing to submit two, the same two that I briefed you on in March. I'll go through them each briefly now. So one, Arlington Boulevard, Washington Boulevard Interchange ramp number 1. This is the on-ramp to westbound Route 50 from Washington Boulevard. It's one of our very highest priority Vision Zero projects. It's the county's highest year-over-year crash location. One of our hotspots. Both roads are on the Vision Zero network. This would be a $10 million project, roughly $10 million project, 9.6, I think, to reconfigure the interchange ramp and trail approaching it and crossing it to essentially make the ramp straighter, reducing its radius, putting signals at both ends, and moving the acceleration area for cars from the ramp to Route 50 itself after the trail crossing. So that moves the trail crossing essentially down the ramp to where there are better sight lines and where cars are moving slower, resulting in drivers who are accelerating onto Route 50 doing that acceleration after they've crossed the trail rather than on top of the trail. This is a very high priority for us, so much so that, spoiler alert, I'll also talk about it during our next agenda item. Suffice it to say, we are really excited to get this project done. We think it's really, really necessary, really, really ripe for moving through the process, getting funded, getting constructed, and we would like to submit it to Smart Scale and hope that you will concur with that. That brings me to project number 2 on our list, the Arlington Boulevard, Manchester Street left turn lane extensions. So this is a project that comes from Vdot's STARS program. STARS is the Strategically Targeted Affordable Roadway Solutions program. This is a little bit awkward because this is a Vdot priority that we would apply to the state for on the state's behalf. In the old days, per pre-Smart Scale, Vdot would just sort of build this, right? Ultimately, they still could just sort of build this, and Smart Scale doesn't give us a veto over Vdot doing things exactly, but to access some of the pots of money that are useful for projects like this and that Vdot is allowed to use, this is how you do it now. So here we are. The project would lengthen the left turn lanes on Arlington Boulevard at Manchester Street, both of them, and going both directions. Basically, those left turn lanes are short today as they fill up with cars queuing, drivers coming along Route 50 at higher speeds swerve around them to avoid stopping because the cars queue up and then end up in the general purpose lanes. So drivers in a general purpose lane swerve around the cars that are queued into the general purpose lane in order to not have to stop. And this results in, a lot of crashes. So this is, just to be fully clear, distinct from the signal phasing project that you may be familiar with on Arlington Boulevard. It's also a Vision Zero hotspot. It costs about $2.5 million. And although, it wouldn't impact right-of-way, the project is completely inside the existing, Vdot Route 50 right-of-way. It would require shifting the existing general purpose lanes over to the south, which would likely eat into the existing median that is between the general purpose lanes and the Arlington Boulevard service road. So it doesn't change the right-of-way, but that there's a grassy strip between the main lanes and the service road, and this would extend Route 50 into that median strip by some number of feet. Excuse me. That would likely result in changing slopes, changing landscaping, possibly loss of trees in that location. We would of course work with Vdot to minimize those impacts to the extent possible. And it is actually sort of worth noting that there's a little bit of a strategic advantage in putting this into Smart Scale now, as that would incentivize keeping an existing scope and disincentivize any reason to expand the scope in a way that would allow the cost to get larger. Not to say that that couldn't be done, just that it would be harder. So anyway, this is a very legitimate safety-related project. It's not necessarily DES's very highest priority, but we don't object to it. It doesn't really compete against the Washington Boulevard project since they're happening at different scales. There is, as I said, a legitimate safety issue here. So we are willing to work with Vdot on submitting it. We think that it's ready enough for application and very likely to be funded. So we are, as I said, happy to work with them to fund it. We previously bought both of these projects to you at a previous briefing in March. We did that in March because pre-applications for Smart Scale are due in April. And the pre-application process prevents us from adding new projects at this time. So just a procedural clarification for you. We are asking you to endorse these two projects. You have to have a pre-application in order to have an application. Since the pre-applications are now done, your endorsement of this in terms of Smart Scale's process can be either these two projects or not these two projects. We can't add new projects to Smart Scale at this point in the timeline. With that, again, I'm asking for your endorsement to the county board for these two grant submittals. If there are any questions I can answer, I would be delighted to. And I will save further discussion of the Safe Streets for All program for when we reach that point on the agenda.
All right, thank you, Mr. Maliff. Do any commissioners have questions, given how little has changed since the last time we heard this? Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yeah, for the Route 50 Manchester Street. Would that have ever been on our list, but for VDOT being interested in doing it?
It is a Vision Zero hotspot. Our Vision Zero planning identifies it. I can't tell you how high or low a priority it would have been. If you'd like a follow-up to that question, an answer to that question, I would have to bring in the Vision Zero team and you know, I'm sure they could answer it for you. I'd be happy to follow up.
And the second question is, okay, it's a hot spot for us. Is the solution that VDOT is proposing the solution we would have come up with for Vision Zero to help ameliorate the problems in that intersection?
I think in terms of cars queuing in a left turn lane, it could be. I'm a little hesitant to talk about those solutions being not the Vision Zero planner. I'm sorry to repeat myself. I'm just hesitant to offer an answer on that question. I just don't know it, being the grant person.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Maliff, remind me, is Smart Scale one of the ones where we rank our submissions, or no?
No, we don't rank in Smart Scale. We just submit them both. The only sort of potential concern is projects are technically all competing in the same pot, right? So if you submit for two projects, they compete against each other. Practically speaking, that's not necessarily true, because when the state funds projects, they tend to go through and fund the really, really big ones, or not fund the really, really big ones in order to sort of see what's left. And then they move down to the medium projects, and then the smaller ones, and then the very, very smallest ones. And so just because these projects are sort of in different tiers of request, they're not, practically speaking, going to be really competing against each other. Formally speaking, they do compete against each other, but there's a difference between formal and practical. And to answer the direct question, no, we don't rank our applications.
Commissioner Terry?
Hey, what's the cost share for these for Arlington County for these projects?
Great question. Should have said that. There's no cost share. These are 100% awards. So we can, submit, share costs with other programs. Sometimes we do that, but there's no required match here. These projects have no direct cost to the county.
Okay, so 100% funded by the state.
Yeah.
All right. Two comments, and then I think we're moving towards a motion here. The first is actually, no, I have a question first. There is another project at Manchester, right? There is the signal phasing change that also came out of the STARS program. Has that been implemented yet?
I believe it's been funded. I don't know if it's been implemented. That is a good question.
Because I know in the past we've been loath to line up solution number 2 until we have seen if solution number 1 is going to solve the problem.
Making notes here.
Okay. And then just to, I guess, some comments at this point. One, I'm skeptical of the Manchester project, but I'm inclined to trust staff and endorse its moving forward, since it sounds like it's unlikely to compete with the Washington Boulevard, Arlington Boulevard interchange project. Part of the issue is that I've not seen the full STARS report for Manchester, and I've I have seen the STARS report for other projects that VDOT has put forward and never been particularly impressed by their analysis or felt like they really came to the appropriate conclusions. But I'm inclined to allow it to move forward. And then I would love, Mr. Maliff, if you would take back to your wonderful colleagues in public engagement that I'm a little sad that Washington Boulevard, Arlington Boulevard Interchange has gotten far enough along in design that we can submit it for grant funding without any public engagement touch point that I'm aware of. There's more detail in this grant application than I've ever seen for how we think we're solving this problem. And I really wish that we hadn't gotten quite this far without checking in with the community on those potential solutions to what I believe we all recognize is a place that needs solutions. So I hope we will see a public engagement opportunity on that project before too much longer. Though how much we can change it once we've submitted Smart Scale, I think is a little bit of a not great answer, since it will be scored based on particular solutions in the grant application, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There are design details that can, of course, change. I mean, the Smart Scale doesn't completely lock you in. It locks you into an estimate that the state scores and funds. And if your estimate drastically changes because of a changing scope, then that puts you at risk of having your project rescored. But drastic is kind of a key word in that description. All projects go through some revisions as they go along. There's always, the trail needs to move 2 feet this way because there's a tree. These are just examples out of my head. So, yes, you're correct, but sort of only up to a point, if that makes sense. Uh-oh. Either I'm disconnected or, oh dear.
Oh, we lost Chairman Slatt.
Okay.
Or he's sleeping.
Yeah, maybe he can come back and put in chat. Maybe he's.
My apologies, Teams crashed out of nowhere. I am back.
So, not being completely clear with what you heard and what you didn't, I will do a very fast sum up. All projects go through some revisions. Smart Scale doesn't lock you into no revisions at all, but it locks you into no drastic revisions to your scope that would be large enough to trigger a rescore. If you have to move the trail 2 feet over or something like that, that's it's fine.
Great, thank you very much. Any other commissioner questions or comments before we move to a motion? All right, then I will move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board authorize Arlington County's application to Smart Scale Round 5 funding for up to $12.5 million. Whereas $10 million would be requested for the Arlington Boulevard, Washington Boulevard Interchange Ramp 1, and $2.5 million would be requested for the Arlington Boulevard, Manchester Street left turn lane extension.
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion of the motion? All right, then we will move to a vote. Commissioner Brose.
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Ludlow.
Aye.
One more time, Commissioner. Oh, thank you. Commissioner Maradovic.
Aye.
Commissioner Raddick.
Aye.
Commissioner Terry.
Aye.
And I will also vote yes. Did any other commissioners join in the interim? Not that I see. All right, so that passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Maliff.
All righty, so the next item is also with Dan Maliff, and it is the US DOT Safe Streets and Roads for All FY 2022 funding application.
All right, very good. This is a new funding program through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I briefed you on it briefly at your June 2nd meeting, but just a very quick recap. This is essentially a federal Vision Zero grant program. Grants are due September 15th through the US DOT. We don't go through states for this. Localities are limited to one application of between $5 and $30 million. We think the sweet spot is around $10 million for an implementation award. That's a little bit of speculation based on math of how many they say they think they will give and how much money there is, but that's what we think. Projects need to be clearly identified in an existing Vision Zero type plan. This is for FY22 money. Awards are expected around the new year, so it's coming very quickly. This is different from Smart Scale in the sense that it is 80% funding. You do need a 20% match. It's not 100%. And money does have to be allocated within 5 years. You can't sit on it forever. You do have to eventually spend money. As I mentioned, this is coming much sooner. We could be, winners, grantees could have money in hand by 2023. So because this is a federal program, projects do have to be federalized, naturally speaking. It is also worth noting that this is going to be an annual program for at least the next 5 years. We can apply again for another project a year from now, and a year after that, and a year after that, and a year after that. We're already thinking of projects that could meet those timelines. We're really hoping for next year to have some George Mason Drive projects planned by that time, but they're not ripe for it yet. For now, having established that our existing Vision Zero planning does in fact make us eligible for implementation awards, which is something I spoke on last month, we are looking for a project that is ID'd in our existing Vision Zero planning, comes in at around $10 million, can be allocated within 5 years, and is already on the federalization track, if possible. Who remembers their spoilers? We are proposing the Washington Boulevard, Arlington Boulevard Ramp #1 project. I won't take you through all of the details of it again unless you'd like me to. I'd certainly be happy to. But suffice it to say, this is our highest crash location year over year. It addresses huge safety needs. It's $9.6 million. We really think it's a slam dunk project and a really, really high need project. And it's already on the federalization track because it's on the Smart Scale track. And we've already been working that for a long time. So we also think it's a better fit for SS4A, for Safe Streets for All, because of the program goals and the sweet spot. So we think it's just very competitive and likely as one can get in a new federal program like this to be awarded. Also, since Safe Streets for All is going to be awarded much sooner than Smart Scale and will get the money much sooner than Smart Scale, our recommendation is to submit this very high priority project to both programs. Basically hedge our bets that we'll get at least one of them, hopefully the sooner one, even though it has a 20% match requirement. We would, of course, have to inform Vdot if we got that. If we won Safe Streets for All, we're not going to then win the full amount from Vdot and end up with $20 million and like throw a party and spend 10 on whatever we want. We would have to, inform Vdot, reduce our Smart Scale request to be whatever was left unfunded after the Safe Streets for All request. If the federal government funds it at 100%, wonderful, great. We'll just not do the Smart Scale application. Well, we'll submit it, but we wouldn't have an award. If, as is possible, the federal government decides to partially fund our Safe Streets for All award, then our Smart Scale request would be reduced to the amount that was left to the balance, which would help it be more competitive because smaller projects do, score better. That could trigger competition against the other projects, but we think that that would be a good problem to have. It would be nice if the higher priority project came in at a lower cost. So that's pretty much all I have to say, unless you'd like to go through the project again. We'd really like to build it. We think it's ready to go, fits really well. We think it's really, really likely to get funding through this project, as much so as we can be with any federal program that we've never done before. And I'm asking for your endorsement of it now.
Great, thank you, Mr. Maliff. Do any commissioners have questions or comments? Commissioner Terry, I was really hoping your hand was going to go up.
Well, that's curious. Let's talk more about that. Hi, Dan. Thanks for this. I think this is a fantastic program. It's really targeted to local communities as opposed to the state level, and I'm glad to hear that Arlington's looking at this. I'm sure, as you know, some of the big things that this administration is looking for and specifically called out in this program are equity and safe system approach. And I was wondering if you could tell me more about what Arlington is saying they're going to do on those two fronts with these projects in order to be competitive.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for it. So the way that we typically answer that sort of question is to basically pull up our equity emphasis areas. This is a tool that we have that COG develops in coordination with us, and looks at where trips are trying to go from equity emphasis areas. Those are places with a high concentration of populations with equity needs. And so, we essentially match where those needs are, where the trips are coming from, where they're going, and does the project serve them? And so, the equity analysis for this project isn't done yet. We are, just starting all of the work on submitting the grant, because the county board doesn't meet in August. We have to do it in July so that we can meet the September 15th submission deadline. If the board's meeting on September 17th or a few days earlier, we might not have that timeline issue. So, broadly speaking, I can say that we will look at the county's equity planning, identify how the trips from those areas serve this area, and report those. We have done an initial pass on that. We do believe that this is, serving a legitimate equity need of, people using a lower cost mode of travel to access job centers, activity centers from parts of the county that are not job centers, that are more residential, in a safe manner. But again, we haven't finished the equity analysis. So does that give you some direction, at least?
Yes, I'm glad you're taking a look at it. I think that is something that should be heavily emphasized in whatever the county submits. And then the other part of that was also the safe system approach and how you're addressing that in the application as well. If you could just tell me a little bit more, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, no individual segment of the transportation system exists on its own. This is an important crossing. It's an important part of our network that we think matters for the rest of the network to to function safely. We did look at doing sort of a more systemic approach for this application, looking at more a larger number of smaller projects spread around different locations, and didn't think that would be as viable. So we think this is striking a balance between serving the needs of the whole network and being a doable project.
I'm sure, as you know, there are 5 main elements to the safe system approach. Federal Highway Administration has outlined those, and I encourage also the county in the application process to take a look at those 5 elements and ensure that you're trying to address as many of those as possible to really show that you're hitting on the safe system approach and in its entirety as much as you can. And I'm sure you're also aware that DOT's done a number of webinars for applicants for this program, and I'm hoping that Arlington has been able to participate or at least catch one of those recordings as you can later.
Thank you for that guidance. I'm making detailed notes.
Thank you, and I'm thrilled that we're going to apply for this.
Thank you, Commissioner Terry. Commissioner Muradovic, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I just want to go on the record and echo Chairman Slat's earlier point about it would have been really nice to have seen some of this information a little bit earlier. I'm sure Commissioner Terry would have been able to provide even deeper insights before, we kind of submit this further. I kind of feel like like at the Chinese Communist Party Congress, where I'm just like, unanimously deciding on stuff already being brought to a decision in a way. So I feel like the whole advisory aspect of the Transportation Commission is not really being put to use within this current format. And I know we've had some great interactions before, and I hope we'll have more of those rather than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Muradovic. Anyone else? All right, seeing no hands, then I move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the County Board adopt the resolution applying for $10 million in up to $10 million in funding from the Safe Streets and Roads for All program for the Arlington Boulevard, Washington Boulevard Interchange Ramp 1 project.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Brose. Is there any discussion? All right, then we'll move to a vote. Commissioner Brose.
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan.
Aye.
Comey.
Aye.
Commissioner Ludlow.
Aye.
Commissioner Muradovic.
Aye.
Commissioner Raddick.
Aye.
Commissioner Terry.
Aye.
And I will also vote yes. That passes unanimously. Thank you again, Mr. Maliff.
All right, that ends the agenda items that we have tonight. On to other business. Our next meeting is Thursday, September 1st. Any other business to discuss?
I just dropped the county's Engage page into the chat. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. I just wanted to highlight there is quite a bit of engagement going on right now through the holiday weekend. If folks want to take a look, there's engagement open on the Arlington Boulevard Trail Study that Ms. Obakoya is so wonderfully project managing. There's also some open engagement on behind the curb, what behind the curb should look like on Route 1 to grade in Crystal City, separating Crystal City from Pentagon City. And there is a open engagement on repaving for complete streets, 5 streets that are getting repaved the county would like to put back better than they are right now. So this is the kind of stuff that isn't usually quite high enough level to come to the commission much, but you're all, super interested in transportation. It's great to go ahead and weigh in your personal capacity. Click on the map and drop your pins and be heard. So I wanted to go ahead and highlight that tonight.
Thank you for the plug. I appreciate it. It's an exciting project.
Yeah, held the engagement open a little longer, so
yeah.
So get in here. So that felt like I had to say something.
Yeah, today was the last day. We extended it until July 7th. So
yes, that sounds right. Anybody else? Anything for the good of the order from your liaison positions? Anything? All right, then. we are adjourned until our next meeting.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Good
Have a
Good
great
night.
summer.
Thank you. Good evening.